Thank you. Now, Oxford University is in the process of electing a new chancellor, and the race has now been whittled down to 5 candidates. One of those 5 is Lord Hague, the former Foreign Secretary and former leader of the Conservative Party, and he joins us now. Lord Hague, a very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure.
I've been looking through your pitch to be Oxford Chancellor, and you clearly had a great fondness for it and your time there. And I just wonder, the top question, with all that you've achieved over your long career, do you trace it all back to Oxford? Would you have achieved it without having gone there?
Well, probably not, really. No, Oxford transformed my own life, really. I arrived here not knowing a single person in the whole city, and no one in my family had ever been to university before. And I feel by the time I left Oxford, I was ready to take on all the challenges of the world. So I do think that in what I've done in the 40 years since then, mainly in government, but also in business and the media and writing, that I've accumulated experiences that now I can give that back to Oxford in so many ways and help the future 17 and 18-year-olds like I was in the past. So I do attribute a lot of my career to Oxford, and I want to help the next generation. That is, in a nutshell, that is why I'm standing for the position of chancellor.
Reading through the rest of your kind of campaign literature, some of the points jump out to me. One of them is you say you want to make sure there is freedom of speech at Oxford University. Is it at risk currently?
Well, there have been a lot of debates, as you know, about freedom of speech, about so-called cancel culture. There have been 1 or 2 disturbing cases over the last 5 or 6 years where some people have been prevented from speaking at universities. To me, it's very, very important that as a student, you hear things that make you uncomfortable, actually, that are a different perspective on life, and that often you adjust your own views as a result of that. So freedom of speech does need defending. We always have to be vigilant in defending it. And the outgoing government did pass an act through Parliament to particularly entrench that, which the new government has decided not to commence, not to enforce, at least not decided so far to do that. I think it would be better if they did that. So yeah, there is a legitimate argument about free speech, and it's one of the values of great universities that needs protecting.
When you talk about wanting to make sure the university is at the forefront of technological change and scientific development and research, has Oxford slipped a little bit behind its rival? Cambridge is a big hub for that at the moment?
Well, we've got some great universities, in the scientific and technological field. There's Oxford, there's also Cambridge, there's Imperial College. We're fortunate to have some of the top universities in the world. Oxford has been ranked again recently in the very authoritative league table as the #1 university in the world, but it can't ever be complacent about that. There's tremendous scientific work going on here. People will recall that Oxford was instrumental in one of the COVID vaccines, also more recently in a malaria vaccine. And there's work going on here on new biologically sourced materials instead of plastics, and new forms of computing and quantum encryption. Oxford's really at the forefront of this. So I think the challenge here for the next chancellor of Oxford is to communicate to government and the country and the world that what happens in Oxford is critical to the future of the British economy, the future of science in the world. And we should see universities that way around, as a great opportunity and a source of vast knowledge and advance in the future, rather than as a burden on society or something remote from society, which some people sometimes see universities in that way.
Clearly, funding is key to all of this, and obviously the government's recently announced that tuition fees will be allowed to rise. Do you think that was the right choice? And in fact, for a university like Oxford, where students are lucky enough to have a really fantastic leg up in life by attending, should they be allowed to rise quite a lot more?
Well, not a lot more. I think it was inevitable under any government that fees would go up in line with inflation over time, start going up in line with inflation. They've been frozen for a long time, and many universities are facing a financial crisis. So this is part of the solution to that. It's a pity that the government didn't find the space in all the money spent in the budget to improve further the maintenance loans or reintroduce maintenance grants, which they had talked about. What we have to do is to make sure that there's access to great universities, irrespective of background, and that people like me can come in the future who went to a comprehensive school in Yorkshire, and I had a maintenance grant at the time. So we've got to make sure people can have that in the future. There's great scholarships in Oxford, Crankstart scholarships that help a lot of the UK-based students. We're going to need to improve those in the future, expand such scholarships in the future so that people still have access. So I think overall on this, we need a longer-term settlement between governments and universities of how they're expected to finance themselves and what the government expects from the universities, so that there's something sustainable over the next 20 years.
Presumably, Lord Hague, if Lord Mandelson was appointed as ambassador to the United States, you'd welcome the reduction in competition you face for the chancellorship.
Well, there are 5 candidates, and so I don't know who it's hard to know who the main competition is. Yeah, Lord Mandelson is one of the other candidates, and it's very important we have an outstanding ambassador to the United States in the coming months. I would just say that from my own way, I'm not commenting on the other candidates, but my own approach to this is, if I'm elected Chancellor, I will spend a lot of time in Oxford. The current Chancellor, Chris Patten, does dozens of engagements every year in Oxford, supporting colleges, spending time with students, as well as the big ceremonies. So I regard it as very important to do that. I will structure my life around Oxford for the next 10 years if I'm elected. And other candidates must explain what they will do.
It's good to see that it says live Oxford at the moment. Slight shame that the backdrop, given what a beautiful city it is a white wall. But either way, good to see you there in Oxford. Linked to my question, obviously, do you think Lord Mandelson would be a good ambassador to the United States? And linked to it, because of some of the comments in the past from our top diplomat, do you think there's a lot of work to do to warm the Trump administration to the UK?
Well, there's a lot of work for whoever, and I don't want to, jinx all the different people who could be the ambassador by endorsing anyone in particular of them. The government has got to weigh up just who, as ambassador, would be best at really getting inside the personalities of the Trump administration, because it's an administration that will be particularly based around personal acquaintanceship rather than bureaucratic procedures. There will be opportunities there, but of course it also means if that goes wrong, it can go very seriously wrong. So they have to weigh up who will be best at that. It'll be a different way of working from working with the Biden administration or the Obama administration. Quite personal, very transactional. And with some really big issues at stake on world trade, on climate, and above all on the Ukraine war. So there's a lot of work to do. I'm very worried, as many people are, about what could happen under the Trump administration. But it's been elected fairly and squarely, and Britain has to work with that now.
I know you were worried, and you said so in an op-ed before the election about this outcome. It seems, according to a lot of reporting, that Marco Rubio is likely to be Trump's pick as Secretary of State. Does that placate in any way some of your concerns? Is he a sensible choice? Do you know him at all?
Only slightly. I mean, he's a very energetic figure and politically experienced figure. Not necessarily experienced in all aspects of world affairs. Very hardline views on China. Now, the United States and the West are in a strategic contest and competition with China. But I think it would be a mistake to cut off the chances to talk to China, to have trade with China. One of the concerning things that might happen in a Trump administration is such heavy tariffs on trade between the US and China that it damages the remaining links between the countries and world trade at the same time. So I would be concerned if you took that too far. America has to protect its technologies. The West has to make sure that we're safeguarded against espionage and theft of intellectual property. All of that is very, very important. But we do have to keep channels of communication open to China. So it remains to be seen exactly how they would proceed. But yes, I do have concerns about how they might.
I'm interested, sort of in principle, more than the practicalities, as to whether you think the UK government should be altering, particularly on the economic front, its approach to the 5 years ahead, given the result of the US election. Should someone abandon their principles, a government abandon their principles and suddenly deregulate more to attract tech investment in light of the election, or to be more protectionist or pro-US and anti-EU, or should they stick to their guns, whether you agree or disagree with what was in the budget?
Well, they should be. This country, in any case, needs to do a lot more to make sure we are at the forefront of artificial intelligence, of biotech, of innovation. I've mentioned some of the things that are happening in Oxford and elsewhere that are great. But most of the action on that is happening in America. I was disappointed that the budget did not set out clearer plans. We're hoping for more from the government over the next few weeks when an important report on the opportunities of AI will be delivered. But they really will have to make sure there's fast-moving regulation that attracts new industries and services to this country. So they should be doing that. And they should have provided more in the budget for defense. Because I think it's inevitable in a more dangerous world that we will need to spend more on defense. So I would get on with setting out the plans for that and making sure that that supports a lot of innovation in the country. Because otherwise, Donald Trump is going to come along and say, right, you all have to spend 3% of GDP on defense, and the UK and other countries won't know how to provide it. So yes, innovation, some appropriate, fast-moving regulation, and increased emphasis on defense, all things we should be doing anyway, but are all vital, particularly vital, given the change of president in the United States.
A couple of questions before we let you go, if it's OK, about the Conservatives. Of course, Kemi Badenoch is the new leader. You have experience of picking up after a resounding Labour win as the leader of the opposition, and obviously it was a long time in opposition for your party after the '97 result. Will history repeat itself there, or do you think that Kemi Badenoch will ultimately be the next Conservative leader to lead the Conservatives back into government?
Well, I think she has a good chance. We always have to learn from history, but history never actually exactly repeats itself. And so there are some similarities here. You know, the Conservatives have had a very, very heavy defeat, even heavier than the time just before I took over from them in 1997. On the other hand, it's a much more competitive political situation because I was up against Tony Blair at the height of his power, where everything was going well in the world, and it was really hard for an opposition to get any traction at all. This is very different. Of course, there are all the issues we've just been talking about, and the Labour government is already unpopular after its first few months. So there's a much stronger chance, I think, of Kemi Badenoch becoming the Conservative leader who becomes Prime Minister than there was for me all that time ago. I really did the night shift. And there's an opportunity for the Conservatives to have a new dawn rather earlier in this scenario. And she's got a very sensible, well-judged emphasis on explaining her values and principles first before rushing into a lot of policies, which when we're still 4 years from another election. So I think that's showed good judgment on her part so far.
Just finally, Lord Hague, back to your pitch to be Chancellor of Oxford. I read in your pitch, you're also saying you're not adverse, luckily, to wearing the silly robes that would come with the job. I wonder, you might not be averse to it, but do you look forward to that? Is there some modernisation of the university that's needed?
I don't think I said silly, by the way.
No, I might have added that word.
You might have added that.
Special effect. I don't think it's spinning an important part of the interview, though. I hope you'll agree.
No, absolutely. No, I think it's Oxford has to blend modernity with tradition. The traditions are great and they remind people there's 800 years here of excellence and learning, and that you maintain the traditions to maintain everybody's awareness of that, and really great practical traditions like the tutorial system, where students spend a lot of time with their tutors who get to know them as individuals. So there's all these traditional strengths in Oxford, but it has to be at the forefront. I mentioned a lot of scientific advances and how you combine science with ethics and philosophy and language and history. This is the place to bring disciplines together, and this is the future. So modernity and tradition can be combined in Oxford.
Lord Hague, it's great to catch up. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed.